call the meeting to order. Please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag
of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
First order of business is to approve the agenda.
I'll make a motion to approve the agenda.
We need a second.
I'll second it.
Moved and seconded to approve the agenda. All those in favor, aye.
Aye.
Aye. Those opposed, motion carried. And then we need to approve the minutes of the previous meeting.
I'll make a motion to approve the minutes. They look good.
Second.
Moved and seconded to approve the minutes. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Those opposed, motion carried. The next thing on the agenda is public comment, and I will ask how many people wish to take advantage of this opportunity at the beginning of the meeting. And if your hands, I got to count. You see, the procedure is I need to know, as chair, approximately how many people are going to be interested in doing public comment at the beginning of the meeting. And if there's a whole lot of them, I'm probably going to have to put a time limit on it. If there aren't very many, then I've got some freedom then. Although we do have a schedule, we do have to try to keep to it as best we can. So again, if you want to have public comment at the beginning, why, please put your hand up so I get some idea. Okay, thank you. You're closest, so you get to be first.
Thank you. My name is Jennifer Daly Oaks. I'm a resident of the city of Spring Grove, and I am a social worker in the Adult Services Department.
Could you pull that microphone a little bit closer, please? It's movable. It bends. It does all kinds of nice things for you.
Is that better? Okay. I am a social worker in the Adult Services Department of Houston County Human Services. I wear many hats in my role as a social worker. I work on civil commitments for mental illness and chemical dependency. I petition the court for guardianships and conservatorships. I investigate allegations of abuse and financial exploitation of vulnerable adults in Houston County. I also provide case management and connect residents of Houston County with resources they need to be independent, safe, and healthy. The individuals I serve are some of the most vulnerable members of our communities. I feel honored that I get to do this very important work, helping to keep our communities safe and healthy for everyone. I'm also a mother and the sole wage earner in my household. I have a son who will be going to college next year, a son in middle school who has special needs, and my youngest son is still in full-time daycare. I need to be paid a fair wage for the work I do, so I can provide what is needed for my boys to grow into healthy, productive members of our communities as well. Thank you.
You can come on up, sure.
Hello.
Hello.
My name is Rebecca Wilhelmsen. I've worked in Houston County for 2 years. As a social worker, I really enjoy working with educated and experienced members of my team and in human services. I really enjoy working with all the individuals I have on my caseload who deserve consistency and quality work. I want a fair market rate wage for my clients to have that consistency and longevity as they should have. I also want to provide for my soon-to-be family to come with quality care and affordable living. Thank you.
Thank you. And we have an appointment scheduled for a couple minutes ago with Judge Lunig from Veterans Court.
Hi, I'm Judge Ross Luning. I am chambered in Albert Lea. I live in Owatonna, and I'm glad to be here today. So first, I do want to say thank you for inviting me over here to talk to the county commissioners about our Veterans Court that we're creating. The first thing, and maybe sometimes the most important thing I've learned from these meetings I've been attending is to point out that I'm not here to ask for any money today. And I don't expect to be here asking for money in any time in the near future. I'm here to tell you about our plan for a Veterans Court and what we can bring to you here in Houston County through the Veterans Court. I know I'm allotted 15 minutes. I'll try to keep it less than 15 minutes, and so if you have questions, I can answer those. If you want to go beyond 15 minutes, I'll stay as long as you want me to stay, and I'll answer every question that you have if I can. I will note that I've done many of these now, and they mostly I get set for about 15 minutes, and they go about 45 to 75 minutes. So I'm okay with that if you are. First, let me tell you what is a Veterans Court and why are we here talking about it. Veterans courts are a subdivision of treatment courts. Treatment courts are typically, we think of DWI courts or drug treatment courts. And they are specially focused on, those particular courts are specially focused on the offense and not necessarily the offender. And getting the offender specified treatment and intensive treatment and intensive court supervision so that we can put their past behaviors behind them, make them productive citizens again. Veterans courts adopted that model. They started in 2008 in Buffalo, New York, and they grew off that model, but the spin-off brought with it some differences. In particular, veterans courts focus on the offender, not the offense. And they also incorporate what veterans courts call mentors, and those are veterans, people who are veterans within the community, who volunteer their time, and they are equivalent to what you would think of as a sponsor in an AA program. They are essentially the sponsor for the particular veteran who happens to be in front of the court who's having some difficulties, criminal difficulties. We use that model because it's proven to be extraordinarily effective. And treatment courts themselves have been extraordinarily effective. They've reduced the repeat offense by these offenders dramatically, so that rather than seeing these people time and time and time again in our courts, that revolving door thing that we as judges seem to see all the time, they come in, we get them on track, we get their life back in order, and they don't come back. That's a good thing. That's a good thing for them. That's a good thing for our communities. And frankly, that's a good thing for our budgets as well. So how did it come about that we started looking at a veterans court? Well, first of all, we're looking at a district-wide veterans court, not simply a county-wide like you might find in Hennepin County or Ramsey County and such. We're looking at the whole 3rd Judicial District, all 11 counties. And the reason why we're looking at that is primarily because most of the counties in our district don't have enough of a veteran population involved with criminal justice issues to really support a standalone court. Olmsted is the only exception. They have enough veterans and therefore enough veterans involved in criminal justice issues where they could probably do it all by themselves. The rest of us, we can't. but veterans courts have proven to be the most effective treatment courts out there in reducing recidivism. And frankly, our people deserve it. And so we're going to make it a district-wide court. Our plan is to divide the 3rd District into 2 halves, a western half and an eastern half. Of course, you're in the eastern half. And we'll have 2 judges designated. I will be covering the western half. Judge Chase out of Rochester will be covering the eastern half. We've talked with some other judges about having them substitute in and get involved as well, so that we always have coverage. Houston, because you are farther away from the centers, we're looking at things like ITV, bringing people to the court through our telecommunications. We use that a lot with other court proceedings. I just went out and visited the Billings, Montana Veterans Court, and that's a statewide veterans court. So you can imagine they have to be very creative in how they get their people to their courts, because Montana's a bit of a large state. So I'm in communications with their judge, figuring out exactly how they do it, and we want to adopt that. Our courts have all of the ITV programming in place. All of that is there and ready to be used. So why do we want veterans courts? What advantages are there? First of all, it cuts down recidivism. Second of all, it saves us lots of money. And to be clear, I don't want to just throw out a general term like that. But first of all, what are the costs in a criminal justice case? When a person's on probation, if it's a drug issue, they go to treatment. It could be inpatient or outpatient. If it's a domestic violence issue, they go to domestic violence programming. Things like that. What is readily available out there for veterans are these same programs that are provided for and paid for by the Veterans Administration. So right now we have a lot of veterans going through our criminal courts that are using up our county dollars and our state dollars getting their treatment and their programming, when if we knew about them and we were working with our VSOs and our VJOs, we could get them funneled into the VA system and capitalize on the money that's already allotted for them and save the county and the state those costs. The other cost savings, of course, is if we reduce the repeat offenses, we reduce the number of jail hours that these people serve, we create more room in the jail for other issues and other people. We save those dollars that would have been spent treating or programming them to be spent on the other people in the community. So it has a ripple effect of providing additional savings or reallocation of resources to other issues. The other, I think, very important component is the federal government is pushing this very hard. In 16, they allotted $95 million to treatment courts. That's gone up. I'm not sure what it is for this year, but I'm told it's going to be a higher amount. In fact, I think the numbers are probably out there. I couldn't find them. Right now, well, in 17, the federal government allotted $7 million for veterans courts alone. Currently, they're saying the grants from the federal government to the veterans courts, the implementation grants, range from $300,000 to $500,000. Just recently, Stearns County, which is St. Cloud, got a $550,000 grant to start their veterans treatment court. Stearns County is very similar in size and population to Olmsted County. I'm not saying that we are guaranteed $550,000, but in comparing ourselves to the other counties, we know that we're going to be somewhere probably in the range of $300,000 to $500,000 if we get that grant. Will we get the grant? I don't know. But I do know that to get to qualify for the grant, the two most important things they look for is, has your team gone through the National Drug Court Training Program? We did that in July. Have they done drug treatment court visit, or a mentorship court visit. We did that just last month. And we also have a highly experienced grant writer who has agreed to help us put together our grant application. Someone who's been very successful in getting grants for drug treatment courts throughout the state through this same federal program. So we have some, well, we're told that the success rate is about 100% for the people who've done those two programs and then filed their application. So that's what we plan on doing. Ideally, we would like to get this started by July of next year. The grant process closes in February. We should know and have the money in place by roughly July, roughly. So that's our timeline. We are hoping to start experimenting, doing maybe some informal work on the west side of the district. We have the facilities lined up. We'll use the Steele County Courthouse. We've got time allotted to us already. We've got court administration staff allotted to us already. We've got probation on board who can handle it. I know on the eastern side, the counties are spread out a little bit more. The courthouses are spread out a little bit more. We're working on that issue. One of the things we're considering is trying to develop a satellite model, maybe using the local county courthouses and maybe having the judge come in through ITV. We haven't nailed that down yet, but we're looking at the geographic issues, and we're going to solve those. One of the most important things, and let me, maybe I should back up. I didn't introduce myself completely and properly. I am a judge in the third Judicial District. I've been on the bench for 7.5 years now. I got volunteered for this, and I say it particularly that way because I didn't, this is not my idea. This idea started sort of simultaneously among county attorneys and probation officers who were all clamoring for this Veterans Court, asking, why don't we have one? Why don't we see that around here? I'm the only veteran on the bench. So, as I said, Judge Jody Williamson called me one day and she said, Ross, we want to start a Veterans Treatment Court and we want you to spearhead it. And of course, I understand there's only one answer, and I said, of course I would. And I'd be happy to, and I'm glad to do this. But I want to give credit where credit is due. It certainly is due to the county attorneys, to the probation officers, to Judge Leahy in Monona County, and Judge Storino here in Houston County. Those two judges have been very supportive and very vocal in pushing us to get this done. And I'm glad of it. And I'm glad I got volunteered to do this. I don't know if any of you have served in the Navy, but in the Navy we have an expression, the letters NAVY stand for Never Again Volunteer Yourself. And I got volunteered, and I'm happy to be doing it. With that, then, I want to ask, I will open it up to any questions. I'd be happy to address them if I can.
So I got a few, more or less from my own knowledge and those watching. What makes the Veterans Court different than just normal court? Like, what's the structure or not the rules or laws, but why is there a separate Veterans Court from a regular court? What is the
Sure, well, and that's a perfect question. And so first of all, what makes it different? It's an informalized court, so we relax the proceedings. Second, it's an intensive court that requires the participants to come about every 2 weeks is the standard. We're going to try to make that standard. And it requires the participants to be more actively engaged in the dialogue rather than just have the judge talk at them. The other thing that makes a Veterans Court more successful is the people we work with. Because frankly, if you've seen criminal court in most counties on most days, the vast majority of the people we see have never had a very good start in life. Most of them haven't graduated high school. Most of them are poverty-stricken. Most of them are addicted to drugs or alcohol or something. And they are really starting from a really deep hole. Veterans are a little different than that. Veterans you can't get in the military anymore without having a high school diploma. They go, get training, get programming. They've proved that they're the kind of personality that, if directed, can take on direction and ideas and can adopt that kind of leadership. They've proven that they can adapt to programming. And really, we capitalize on that aspect of their past life, their history. In addition, we match them with a mentor, a veteran. And that's proven to be very important. And it's hard to explain why. But it seems that when a veteran is with a veteran, they feel a better connection, a better bond, a stronger bond. It's I don't know if any of you have served, if any of you have been deployed in combat, but you know, when my brother came back from Vietnam, he didn't talk about Vietnam for 2 decades at least. When I came back from Iraq, I didn't talk about Iraq, and I don't. Because it's hard to come up with the words to describe the experience. There's just no words to describe the intensity of being there. The loneliness, the fear, everything that goes with it. I just don't have the vocabulary to describe it to someone who's never experienced it. Veterans, they connect because they've experienced it. And it crosses a bridge so fast and gets people up and running so much better when you have a mentor that you connect with that quickly. And so it's proven to be just dramatically successful, primarily because of the mentors, not because of the judge, not because of the probation officers. I think it's the mentors that are the difference.
If a veteran commits a crime here in Houston County, who would decide if this court becomes a reality that he or she would go to the Veterans Court rather than our local court? Can they make that decision? Does a county attorney make that decision? How is that?
Sure, yeah. Well, that's a very important question. And we screen people first to determine if they're veterans. Second, then we take referrals, and primarily, now, defense attorneys can refer, probation officers can refer, the jail can refer, but the county attorney has a say in it. And the county attorney may say, not this person, not this crime, not this time. So I would say the first gatekeeper would be the county attorney. And they may say, you know, for this particular reason, I don't want this individual going through the treatment court program, I won't send him. That's the first key. Then we screen them, and the screening process determines what kind of programming they may be eligible for, what kind of benefits they're eligible for through the VA, because most of them will be eligible. I think on average they say about 90% of the people in veterans treatment courts are VA eligible. There's a segment that aren't, and that segment would then have to go through the regular programming that's available in your particular county for those types of offenses. So really the gatekeeper would be primarily the county attorney and the screening process.
Okay, so then say they're convicted and sentenced to incarceration, then that would come back to the county that they were charged from?
Sure, I appreciate the terminology. That's right on point with what I should be talking about. This is a way to avoid incarceration. This is a way to save space in your jails for those who really need to be incarcerated. This is a treatment court program where what we would be doing is having them work intensively with probation officers, going through the particular treatment designed for them, whether it's drugs, alcohol, domestic violence, what have you. So it's now, incarceration is always a possibility. If they fail out of the program, that becomes the option. And then, yes, they come back through. Here's an important point I forgot to make earlier, which is these people are going to go through your court system anyway. They're just people coming into the court system because of a crime. We're just filtering them out and putting them on a special docket. That they don't avoid punishment, they don't avoid being held responsible. We just deploy the extra assets and tools available to try and help them get their life on track and become contributing members of our community.
So would it be fair to say the Veterans Court would be geared more to not necessarily misdemeanors, but low-level felonies? It's not going to be like, oh, you murdered somebody, go and be with a mentor and you're free. And, you know, I mean, you know what I'm saying? It's going to be more of, like you said, drugs or domestic violence or something that.
You're doing a great job. You're
How do you
summarizing.
describe that?
Well, so in the probation world, they call it risk factors, and
Okay.
and we would not be taking those high risk offenders,
Okay.
Violent offenders. And we are now trying to develop exactly our criteria, but certain folks just are not eligible.
Okay.
And first of all, the federal grants don't allow some eligibility, so that's our first criteria we got to look at and see what limitations are there. But those are usually the violent criminals. And our treatment courts, remember, are treatment oriented. So if we don't have a type of treatment program that can address their behavioral issue, then maybe they're not going to be screened in. That's the screening process. But we have to remember that misbehavior is a manifestation of many other issues. It could be housing issues, it could be employment issues, it could be TBI issues, it could be PTSD issues, and it just manifests itself certainly. And that's what the screening process is to do. And if we determine, look, the misbehavior may not fit drug treatment, it may fit something else like mental health treatment, because it's a traumatic brain injury or it's post-traumatic stress disorder. And we got programs for that. Federal programs paid for, waiting for these individuals, and we just happen to be the net that's going to catch them and get them put into those programs.
Well, I just would say up front, I'm a veteran, not a combat veteran, but my very best friends were all, or a number of them were Vietnam combat veterans. My dad was a disabled Second World War veteran, so I'm very sensitive to veteran programs. But as a commissioner, I also have to be cognizant of sustainability. And what I question is, it's going to get off the ground, hopefully, with government grants. Grants tend to run out.
They do.
Have you
Yes.
got any blueprint for sustainability?
Sure. Well, first of all, the federal grant that I talked about, the implementation grant, that's a 3 to 4 year grant. And then they have what's called a supplementation grant, which is another 3 to 4 years. There's also state grants. It's important to note that Chief Justice Gilday, one of her primary goals is to get some type of treatment court connected to every county in the state. In the 3rd district, we have 4 counties that don't have a treatment court yet. My county, Freeborn, Mower County, Fillmore County, and Houston County. This would check that block for Chief Justice Gilday. But I point that out because there are also state grants to help these treatment courts operate. So and I'll tell commissioners, and I tell commissioners, I know your job. Your job is to worry about balancing the budget. And you should be asking me questions about how are we going to finance this. What I've seen from talking, and I've talked with lots of different judges who do these, So far, I haven't come across one that didn't get the implementation grant and then 4 years later get the supplementation grant. And, you know, the oldest one in the country is 10 years old, and it's still operating on federal grants. I can't promise it'll always be that way, but I can promise you this: the success rate saves money all by itself. It saves jail time, it saves probation officer time, it saves prosecutor time, it saves all of the treatment costs that would come to the county because those costs are being absorbed by the VA. So there's going to be lots of savings just by us implementing and using the other resources out there. And, you know, hopefully what it translates into is less people in the criminal justice system, and that's a savings all by itself.
Where would one get the mentors, and how are they screened?
Well, first of all, we are, I'm not only am I talking to county commissioners, I'm talking to the VFW, and I'm talking to the Legion, and I'm talking to Rotary programs, and I'm talking to veterans roundtables throughout the district. Most of the veterans come from those organizations, the Legion, the VFWs, the roundtables, those kinds of things. So that we're getting word out, anyone can volunteer, and it's a volunteer-only program. There is a mentor training that is paid for by the National Drug and Treatment Court program that all of the mentors get to go to. It's a week-long training teaching them exactly what they can and cannot do. I've met with many mentors, and frankly, they're very impressive. They are as committed as you will find. And yes, there are standards and there are requirements. There's standards of confidentiality. A mentor is not a snitch. They're not there to come and tell the judge what the guy did wrong the last 2 weeks. They are just there to be a support, guidance, and a sounding board. And you know, what mentors are supposed to be.
So last question that I get, when we talk about locations, so you're looking at, you mentioned one in the east and one in the west, and I'm assuming you're talking already existing courthouses, correct?
That's correct.
So how does that work then? You just talk to court admin and they just schedule in, hey, this is going to be today at 3 o'clock is a veterans court case that's going to be in there, or are you talking like setting aside a specific courtroom that's only?
No, it would
It would just kind of
First
funnel
example.
into the
Sure,
schedule.
and to be clear, what we do is we will set aside a certain portion of the calendar on a particular day. So say from 7:30 on Friday morning until 10:30, Veterans Treatment Court.
Okay.
And how it works is we bring all of them in together, and it's a group session almost. They're all called up one at a time, give a presentation, tell us what you've been doing, tell us, have you accomplished these objectives? But they're all there to watch and listen and share. So you know, you might have 10 in for that particular calendar, but it would be a 2 or 3 hour block on a particular day.
Now, would you, the judge that is already deciding in that county, be the one doing this, or would you bring in a judge? Like, would they have to go through certain training to say, okay, this is how we're going to conduct the Veterans Court, or are you talking about having a specific judge come in for that day that only does Veterans Court?
Yes,
Okay.
specific judge only for Veterans Court. As I noted, I will be doing it on the eastern side or the western side. Judge Chase is designated to do it here on the west. So that's another point that I should raise, and that is that gives you essentially a second judge. Judge Serino would be relieved of some of her caseload because it'd be shifted to Judge Chase to handle because he's doing all the veterans. We would, of course, we sometimes take vacation, so we have substitutes come in. But I've been through the training. Judge Chase has been through some of the training, and he'll get through the rest of it soon.
Excuse me. You said when you started that you're not here for money. But what would you like from us? Would you like a resolution that we are supportive of this, that we would participate if it comes to fruition, or exactly what would you like? Houston County to do.
Yes, thank you for asking, because I'm really not asking anything of you. This is more informative. I'm here just because we, as the 3rd Judicial District, want to share with our stakeholders what we're up to, what we're creating in our courts. We don't need a resolution. Of course, if you would like to pass a resolution saying you're on board with this, we'd love that, but it's not like we need anything like that. We just want you to know what we're doing. We want you to know we're going to be using your VSO, and we're going to put him to good work because they are a valuable component in this process. I will say they are the people that really help veterans the most. They know the system, and we all have worked with federal bureaucracy. It is a nightmare, and they help us solve a lot of those problems. So no, we're not here asking you to do anything of any formal nature. We just want you to know what we're doing. As long as we're talking about that, though, you know, I'm not going to pretend that there might not someday be no more grants, right? That happens. But if that ever happens, remember, this is 11 counties. This is not one county. And we divide up the cost among all 11 counties proportionally, so that, you know, you pay just your share of it. So if the cost, this is not a real number, but if the costs were $110,000, you wouldn't be paying $10,000 and every other county paying $10,000. You'd pay what your percentage of veterans going into the court would be. That's how we plan on dividing up the cost.
Thank you. That's important.
Sure. And obviously then Olmsted's going to have the lion's share of the cost because they have the lion's share of the people.
Right. I was on a committee about 7 years ago where we tried to do something with 11 counties for social services, and Olmsted was kind of the thorn in the side because they were much higher population, much richer county, et cetera, et cetera. But so that's good to hear.
You're describing my experience with them as well. Here's the other thing, and one of the things I was so eager to get involved, not just because I'm a veteran, but because if we're going to do this, and I told Judge Williamson this, I said, if we're going to do this, this is not going to be district-wide in name only. This is not going to be an Olmsted court that we call 3rd Judicial District. Because I'm in Freeborn County. I'm not going to do Olmsted's work for them. And I don't want Houston County to have to do Olmsted's work for them. If this is truly district-wide, it's going to be truly district-wide. And that's what I'm here to make sure happens. That's why they have me involved. Otherwise, I would say no.
Very good.
Last quick question that just popped into my head here. You know, you said you don't want to just be district, you know. My question is this. If somebody lives just outside of Freeborn County, outside of our district, and the other side does not have a veterans court, is that still going to get them denied, or is there some kind of flexibility to say, don't worry about it, we'll still help you even though you're not technically on this side of the county?
Sure. You know, the only real limitation is the state line.
Okay.
Because, and by the way, your friends over in La Crosse have had a veterans court since 2010. But right now, we have a fair number of our veterans going to Mankato, which is the 5th Judicial District, in participating in their veterans court. And, you know, we've just got an understanding with them, and they'll take these people because, you know, it's the right thing to do.
I guess that's what I was getting at. Was
So
we're still going to help anybody in the
We'll
state.
do
if they
that,
need
yeah,
it. Okay.
absolutely.
Cool.
As they're doing for us right now.
Okay.
And so we want to make sure we get up on and serve our people more effectively and more completely.
Perfect.
Thank you
Okay.
all for giving me your time. I know I went a little long. I'm pretty excited about this, and hopefully we will be here soon with more information for you as we progress.
Thank you for coming.
Appreciate it.
Thank you very much. Okay, Jeff.
All right. Well, as a veteran, I'm happy to give some of my time to the judge for that. That's a wonderful program. Just a couple of quick updates tonight. I certainly don't need the 15 minutes. I did want to pass along that John and I met with all the school superintendents, and we will be drafting and proposing to an agreement with the school districts for transportation of children in the foster care system. Things have been working fine. There's not a problem. There's just a new regulatory requirement for the schools have this agreement in place, so we'll work with them to quickly put it in place. And John has a draft and is working that, so you'll see that soon. Budget review is going well. I'm impressed with the diligence of all the department heads in their budgeting process and what's in there. You know, it'd be nice to say there's lots of fluff I've found to cut out, but that's not the case. So we will have some tough discussions coming in ahead, but I still have a few departments to go through. But overall, I'm impressed with what they're doing and where they're trying to save money too. So happy with how that's going. One of the bits of good news that did come out of that in talking with the sheriff's department this morning on their budget, the radio analyzer that the board approved a couple weeks back. All 12 counties have decided to participate in that program, and so that cost went down by $1,000 or $2,000, a little over $1,000. So below what we were estimating with 10 counties participating. So it was good to see that. No HR inputs this week, but I will have several actions finalized and submitted for the board to approve next week. We're coming close on several fills, and so we'll have some good news with those next week. Working with Aaron on the comprehensive use plan. There is we discussed at the other meeting the other day to put one in place. Well, there is one. It is admittedly horribly out of date, and so Aaron and I are working on a timeline to get that updated and refreshed. He's currently working on and focused on the zoning updates, which two of them are out for review now. On the, I have to double check, it's the floodplain and, sorry.
Yeah, I got that notice and I can't.
Floodplain
remember.
and the shoreline
Yeah.
chapters have been updated and are out for review. And working with Tess on updating the personnel policies and things too. So we're starting to come out of my sit back and review and watch phase and starting to get into making some actions and taking forward. So that's all I have for tonight, and we'll continue to work on some of the other projects that we've talked about in the past.
Okay, thank you. John? Oh, any questions that the board has of the administrator at this point on that? Okay. Okay, go ahead, John.
Good evening, Commissioners.
Evening.
I've got a couple of things for you today. First would be, I've got 2 guardianship contracts before you. You've seen a number of these over the last months. I think I've mentioned that we had an individual in our county who provided guardianship services for a number of Houston County residents who is kind of retired, and so we are needing to fill some of those contracts, and so they've kind of come up intermittently. We have 2 of those for you today. They're kind of the same story as I've had before. We provide guardianship services for people who are deemed through the court to need guardianship. So I don't know if you want to take those separately or individual or together.
Could probably do them together, I would think.
I would think so.
They're pretty routine.
Yeah.
Together's fine.
Okay.
You have 2?
I've got 2. Yes.
Yeah, I would move that we approve both guardianship hires or
Contracts. actually.
Contracts.
Yeah. If you want me to hire some people, Jack,
contract.
I'll second the
There we
contract
go.
idea.
John, has the county attorney looked at these and
Yes.
approved?
Yes.
Okay. Moved and seconded. Do we have any further discussion? None? All those in favor, aye? Aye. Those opposed? Motion carried.
The other issue I have is a little more complicated. Woodland Industries through ABC provides, ABC is Ability Building Center. They provide employment and training services for people with disabilities in Houston County. They've got a facility here in Caledonia, and that facility serves approximately 46 different participants. Those folks are funded through a variety of different means. What we learned through a DHS audit, however, is that the folks that we are paying for through Adult Mental Health Initiative dollars, we're not able to have them receiving those employment services at a center-based type of place. So in order to use those Adult Mental Health Initiative dollars, it would need to be community-based and competitive. Well, the folks who are receiving these resources many of them have been employees, so to speak, with Woodland for many years. And either they or their guardians really are not interested in making a move. Some of them are reaching a point where they're close to retirement, but would prefer not to retire. But we're not able to use the funding source that we've historically used based on this audit that we had of our Adult Mental Health Initiative dollars. It's kind of interesting because that DHS audit is at odds with some of the more recent person-centered types of practices that are indicated as a result of the Olmstead Act. We've asked questions of the state regarding that, and they say that the statute that they need to follow has not been updated since passage of the Olmstead Act. The reason I mention it is we, as part of person-centered practices, go to those folks and say, okay, where would you want to go? The point of it is that the recipients of service should have input into the services they're receiving and what their goals and plans are, either they or their guardians. Be that as it may, the state is still following a statute that was passed prior to the Olmstead Act was passed at a federal level. So as I see it, we've got a couple of options. A couple of them not very good options at all, and the one that I'm going to suggest I think is a good solution. One would be that we switch the funding for this service to a county funding. That is not something that we've budgeted for in 2019, and it would be a significant increase in outlay for the county. The second would be to say those services are no longer available for those folks, and they wouldn't have that accessible to them, and they would probably then need to be just staying at home, which is a pretty bad outcome for those folks who've grown very accustomed to that employment experience that they've had with Woodland for many years. What I have in front of you today, however, is if we switch some of those folks, approximately 15 of them, to a waiver program, we're able to pay for that through a day training and habilitation program. The problem with it is that site is not licensed to provide those kinds of services. And so what I have in front of you today is an application that we're saying essentially we want to follow person-centered philosophy, follow the wishes of the people who are receiving those services, and use DTNH or day habilitation or day training and habilitation waivered funding to be able to continue serving those folks in those sites. The form that we need to complete with that is something, or the license needs to be approved, and that's a DHS thing, but it requires a county board signature or county board chair. So that's why I'm in front of you today. My recommendation would be that that's the prudent and wise direction for us to go to continue seamlessly providing services for these folks who've received these services for many years.
Is there a chance that it wouldn't get accepted to do it that way?
I guess there is. I don't have experience with this specific thing to be able to say, you know, certain percentage are approved, certain aren't. Clearly there's a financial reason for us to do this, and DHS may clearly see through that and say, okay, you guys would prefer to have waiver pay for this as opposed to the county. That's true. But be that as it may, we really want to focus on the needs of the people who are receiving those services and believe that we have a different revenue stream that would be available. As those folks, we're not switching them to waiver, they're receiving waiver. It's just that the site that we have them at doesn't have that current license. And so what we're bringing here is an update of their license to include those kinds of services.
Would they still go to the workshop?
Yes.
Okay, so it wouldn't be relocating? and
No,
getting-
no.
Okay.
It just, they would continue doing many of the same types of things. It's just that they would be licensed to be able to bill waiver for day training and habilitation, where currently they aren't able to do that. And they aren't able any longer to be able to bill through our adult mental health initiative. So we have a funding issue as to how that organization can continue to keep its doors open serving those folks if they don't have a pay source. So either the county would need to shift those expenditures to a county levy type of expenditure or find a different funding stream. That's what this is. But at the bottom of it is a focus on person-centered philosophy that we really want to make sure that those folks have a say in where they work, what their day training and habilitation types of things would be.
John, is there a timeline on this?
As far as how long DHS would sit on it,
As far as when we need to actually vote on it and approve?
I think we would want to get that process moving as quickly as possible, because this is a 2019 budget issue. So for their services, as I understand it, this would be something that would become a reality in the beginning of 2019. If we don't get ahead of this and have a decision from DHS, it makes it harder for us to respond to potential changes if DHS decides that they don't support our application or our support of Woodland's application. Just because they say no doesn't mean that we can't have a conversation with them either. So sometimes you maybe need to go back and forth. Again, I don't know quite what to expect. It may be something that's fairly straightforward and we could have it done fairly quickly. But I think having enough time for us to be able to respond to whatever DHS may respond is a prudent action.
Where are you in the budget process right now with this particular program?
It's planned as with the current balance of county dollars that we've had, assuming that this is either covered. When we did the budget, we were assuming adult mental health initiative dollars, although we knew that there were some questions as to whether that was going to work or not. We did not build an addition of county resources to sustain it into 19, so we would need to make a revision to that in 19 if we run out of all other options, if the board chooses to continue the service.
So this application will go to DHS, and hopefully you will hear relatively soon whether they approve. And you said 16 people?
15, actually.
Okay. Well, we need to at least try to get the waiver.
I don't see where there's really anything for us to lose in making that
No.
attempt and getting ahead of it to see if DHS will approve that. I can't predict really well at all what their response would be, but it gives us time, whatever their response is, to continue to problem solve if this isn't the solution. This is interesting too, because it isn't that this is something that ABC never does, it's just this site. So there's kind of a complex system of licensure and things like that. So we're not asking for something that this organization never does, it just hasn't been approved at this site.
Jeff, do you have a recommendation on this? Have you heard of it so you know it's,
John and I have talked about it, and I don't see any reason not to go with the way he suggested and pursue this route first.
okay.
So you need a motion at this point to move forward with the application to DHS.
Correct.
So move.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Any further discussion? All those in favor, aye?
Aye.
Those opposed? Motion carried.
I'm wondering, do you have a copy of this form in your signature file?
It's right here for you to sign.
I thought so. Okay. I thought this was a photocopy, but I couldn't remember.
Somewhere.
So, yeah.
Yeah,
This is the, yeah. So
Yeah.
afterwards, we'll take care of it, and here's the two contracts.
yeah, end of the meeting. Yep, okay.
Excellent. That's what I have. You guys have a good evening.
Thanks, John.
Thanks.
Next on the agenda is Carol for a finance update.
We are at the end of the third quarter, and you received your quarterly report, and you got a copy of each department's line-by-line budget, and some of them are colorful and some of them are not. What we end up being is our major funds, which are County Revenue, Road and Bridge, Human Services, and our Debt Service Fund. We're at 73% of our expenditures, 71% of our revenues, and that is because we'll be getting our tax money in starting in November. So it really is pretty much on track with where we should be for the third quarter. We haven't had anything major come up except maybe the Money Creek demolition of the property, that we put a judgment on the property, and hopefully we can get some of that money back. But that's really the only non-budgeted item that's come up so far. And I don't know if you had any questions in looking through the departmental budgets that I could provide any information on. We've also
Just
been
curious, what's the official close date of Wildcat? Has that closed, or?
I believe it has, isn't
Okay.
it? Or is it the end of October?
I'm not sure.
I think you have a
Brian?
meeting tomorrow for it.
I would have to look it up. I think it is October 1st,
Oh,
weather dependent though at that point. So if the weather
Okay.
is good beyond that, the park will stay open at times, but the permanent seasonal sites, I believe they stop at October 1st as far as electricity.
So we have a meeting tomorrow. I'm just curious whether we have a
a final?
financial.
We do not.
We do not.
We're, the electrical bills, are just being
Yeah.
paid, and
I'm,
so we won't have a final until
okay,
later on in the year.
thanks.
Mhm. So really, that's about it for the financial report. And I did indicate to Jeff that this is something that we are required to do. We're required to provide management with an update, a printed copy,
Yeah.
and review it with you, or ask if there are questions. So
And as you
sometimes it's
know,
a
I
short
read through
report, and if you don't have any questions, that's, I guess that's a good thing.
Yeah.
And we're looking
I
at
tend
the-
to read through everything and contact Carol with my questions,
Mhm.
so we might need to do a little budget amendment on our Board of Commissioners
Mhm.
budget. As you probably all noticed, that some of our line items are way out of line
Are
right
kind
now.
of right. Well, they're not really
It
way.
appears that way, but it's not really.
Yeah, they're not really way out of line. I mean,
No, I
it's
know.
showing red because you
Red.
had $100 budgeted and you spent 488. So
Yeah.
it's not a major thing, and there could be a shift if you would prefer not to
That's-
have your.
Well, and we should,
Budget.
technically, we don't have money going out because we don't have anybody in District 3, too. You know what I mean?
Right, so, and we looked at it, it was the
Mhm.
travel expenditures that Teresa
Right.
was looking at. And, those two line items say they're way over budget, but when you add up all the travel expenditures, it
We're
comes in
under.
at 63% of the
Right.
budget. So, it's just
So it's just
because
a
of
matter
where
of
it's
doing
paid
a
from.
budget amendment, basically.
And we do have some other budget amendments that will come forward, because we
Mhm.
had grants that we applied for, and we have the money in, and we paid the money out, and we should get those reflected in the budget. So that's about it.
Okay. Any other
questions?
questions? Okay. Thank you, Carol.
Back to me again. All right, in accordance with Minnesota Statute 13D5 subsection 3C, request a closed session in order to consider an offer for purchase or sale of property with Mr. Rogich involving the 3 parcels, which I won't butcher the numbers of.
And that would be tax parcel
2109070002, 21109400, and 2110940001.
And those are the near the East-South Street here in Caledonia.
So we need a-
We'll be going to closed session.
Need a motion?
We need a motion to go in closed session then.
Motion to go in closed session.
Second.
Moved and seconded to go into closed session. All those in favor, aye? Aye. Those opposed? We are in closed session. We're back in open session.
Turn your mics on again, please, for the benefit of our crowd. And back into open session for the tape purposes at 7:01.
And then Jeff, do you want to read back what the board decided at this closed session at this point?
Will do. All right, we're back into open session. The board has decided not to take any actions on the purchase of this property, but has decided to have further meetings to consider a counteroffer proposal.
Thank you.
Thanks, Ann.
Thank you. Okay, action items. Claims, Human Services, and License Center disbursements.
I would move to approve the Claims, Human Service, and License Center disbursements.
I'll second it.
Moved and seconded. All those in favor, aye?
Aye.
Those opposed, motion carried. Approve special meeting minutes from October 9th, 2018.
I'll make a motion to approve the minutes from 10/9/2018.
Need a second.
Second.
Moved and seconded. All those in favor, aye? Those opposed, motion carried. Confirm MCIT voting delegates and alternates.
Yep, I have that right here. On this letter here, the delegate is Jack Miller and the alternate is Fred Arnold. This is for the meeting on Monday, December 3rd at 4 p.m. at the annual meeting of the Minnesota Counties Intergovernmental Trust. Just need to, if that's correct, we'll sign it and send it in. That should be reversed.
Yep.
Yeah, you'll go there and vote, and I'll be the alternate.
He stated it the other way.
I know, but he said that that's to be reversed.
We can reverse it, yes.
Oh, we can?
Yep.
It doesn't matter. Are you gonna be there?
As far as I know, yes.
Okay, do you wanna go to that?
I just so.
Okay.
Unless you want, if you want to go, I go.
No, it's not a big deal.
Okay.
So I will reverse that,
Okay.
and Commissioner Arnold will be the delegate. Commissioner Miller will be the
Yeah.
delegate.
Probably
Okay.
when they sent it out, they had Jack listed as chair.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Right.
So, okay. Consent agenda. Item to be placed on file, correspondence from Caledonia City regarding public hearing.
I'll make a motion to approve the consent agenda.
Second.
Moved and seconded. All those in favor, aye?
Aye.
Aye. Those opposed? Okay. Discussion items. Commission reports and comments.
I guess I'll start, huh?
Well, I
I had about
it's
five-
tradition, you know.
I had about 5 meetings last week, extension meeting, and I will be brief tonight, being an evening meeting. The first one was extension meeting. And there is a joint meeting with Fillmore County on November 27th. And I think you also saw that they declined to go half with us on the intern for next summer, so we're not going to pursue it either. The extension, state extension, has a new website and is very user-friendly, and we had a little demonstration on it. I was pretty impressed, weren't you, Fred, with the new website?
Yeah.
It looks like you could look up things a lot easier and get your answers to your questions.
Yeah, the old website was sort of
Hard
obscure.
to maneuver through. Yeah, exactly. Then I did go to a railroad meeting, and I know Jack doesn't want to hear about that one, but that was with La Crosse County, and it was just an action group, an action committee, looking for possibly putting in another Amtrak train between Chicago and Minneapolis for business purposes. And it was just information only. And they had all kinds of how it would save the environment, save money, save everything, but they really don't have the backing for it yet. So
Well, did they talk about potential ridership?
they did. They had some really good numbers on the ridership for it. And I do have all the information here somewhere, but they wanted us to contact all of our legislator people to support this when they do bring it up for discussion. It would stop at 13 different stations. It's not really a high-speed rail. It's more like the Empire, the Amtrak, which is in operation now. So they would use the same tracks. They would not be putting in more tracks.
Yeah.
They figured they right now they're serving 155,000 people a year, and they figured that could be tripled easily with people wanting to, because it would be like a 4-hour trip from the cities to Chicago. I can't believe that, but that's one of the things they proposed. And then they're trying to put in another line from the Twin Cities to Duluth, and another one from the Twin Cities to Des Moines, Iowa, and one offshoot to Milwaukee. So it sounds really kind of exciting, but it would take 5-10 years before this.
How many stops are they going to have?
13 stops.
13 stops between Minneapolis and Chicago, and they're going to make it in 4 hours?
Well, that was one of the proposals. No, that was one of my doubts too. And they did have a lot of people asking questions, but, and maybe that was from,
Okay.
it was
Well, when Teresa,
information only, and when I brought it up to Jack that he didn't make that meeting, he said, he's against it. I said, and I went to it, I wanted to talk to him about blowing the whistle every day at 2 in the morning. But
and I was being facetious, I'd have to look at it more carefully, but I'm not really against it. I just said that because it goes by our house.
Yep.
Don't hardly need more
You're
trains.
talking, we gotta make sure that there's a whistle stop right by Jack's house.
Yeah. Yep.
He said the worst part is that when they put the brakes on for changing tracks.
Wheeling of the bearings in the wheels,
Well, no,
Yeah.
it's not the Amtrak, it's the freight trains when they switch at the junction, and they'll sit there, and then they'll leave a gap, and they'll close the gap.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Then I had we had a strategic planning meeting, but then I went to a solid waste meeting with La Crosse County. It was Rick's last meeting, so they did have a little celebration for him and they want him to come back as a consultant for a lot of their projects because he's so well versed on the recycling and the solid waste and everything. But one of the things that they brought out was, we have been talking for the last 5-6 years about raising the fees there for tipping fees and stuff. And they talked about it for a long time about going up $4 from right now, but it's too hard for so many counties to plan their budgets with that big of an increase. So they're gonna do $1 a year increase in 2020, 2021, and 2022. And that should get them to the same amount where we're not using the fund balance that we are required by law to have in solid waste.
So this is an increase for the
Tipping fees,
household, or-
no,
or
it's
what do you
not
mean
for,
tipping fees?
it's for what the haulers will pay to bring their garbage over there. They pay $62 a ton or something like that. So it would only go up to 63, 64, 65 over 3 years, because they end up charging the townships and the cities to make up the difference, you know. So rather than one big $4
So it'd be just
increase.
worked in over 4 years.
Yes, it's easier for them to do contracts with that, so. Yeah, it was a real productive meeting. We also had 2 people, that Matt Harder and Larry Holgram. Matt's from Harder and Larry Holgram's from Hilltoppers. Talk about the education needed for recycling, because people are throwing in a lot more things that can't be recycled, and it's starting to cause a lot of major problems, like 1 and 2s are the only plastics really that are recyclable. You know, they have to separate the rest, even though they're trying to automate that. The fact that people put in Christmas tree lights with their garbage, and they don't like, they like cans and stuff like that to be in bags. It's an education to the public, so we're really gonna push for that. But LaCrosse County puts out, it's called the Recycler, once a year, but they're gonna try and do it twice a year just for education. Let people know what's recyclable, what isn't, what can be brought for hazardous waste, that kind of thing, so. Yeah, so there was a lot of discussion on that too, because I think everybody's got a little bit lax on that.
Recycling bin.
Yeah, well,
Well, because
that
of-
particular thing, just one case that I know of, you talk about newsprint, and they can bail a newsprint, and some foreign country was taking all that stuff, and all of a sudden, they're not taking it anymore
That was
because there's too much of the small ad paper that comes with the newspaper, those small colored ads that are in your Sunday newspaper.
The shiny stuff.
They aren't supposed to be there.
Well, plus we're
And
we're
so
trying to
then
turn
they
this
won't
away
take
now.
it. So
Let's
then,
not take
what
it.
do we do with that stuff?
They said actually,
Yeah.
here in the Midwest, we're better off because we still have paper mills, but the East Coast and the West Coast are really having problems. What do we do with it? You know,
Yep.
nobody's taking it, so. You're gonna see a lot of education coming up about that.
We'll open a paper mill on the East Coast.
Yeah, and they are still using, paper mills are still really using quite a bit in this area, the 3 states. Then I had workforce development, and that was kind of a meeting that was called because we didn't have a quorum last month, and we had business that needed a quorum. So we actually had more than a quorum, so that turned out good. But one of the things I thought, you know, the budget for federal, that's pretty federally funded, was level funding for the next year. So, you know, the budgeting for the federal does due what, October 1st or 31st? Anyway, we got notice that it's level funding, we will be funded. Workforce will be. So that was a good one, too. So those were my meetings, basically, and a reminder about the district meeting. I might need a ride. I told Jack that already, so. And that's it.
Nothing. Just the meeting that we had at Corky's, which we kind of covered.
Okay. Well, I had a lunch last Thursday with Mary Marshall, who did as kind of a exit interview, and discussed the transition as she's leaving of Human Services and Public Health, and good discussion and good information. Then I went to get-together at Signatures in Winona, put on by the Farm Bureau, talking about the opioid crisis in rural Minnesota, and it's significant. Fortunately, I sat next to one of our deputies, and he indicated to the group that actually Houston County is much more affected by meth than we are by opioids at this point. And neither one is good, but at least we're not getting inundated with a lot of opioid issues. Both Miller and Davids were there. It was a good presentation. Quite statewide, it's just continues to escalate, so that's not good. Then I went to the SHAC meeting, and I'll just touch on a few things. Priority action 1 out of there was to clarify the basic public health responsibilities for Minnesota and identify new ways to carry them out, take steps to align public health funding and resources with local needs, take a comprehensive and multi-sectoral approach to public health workforce development. Pretty broad, but one of the things that came up twice now in the last couple of weeks from SHAC is there's public funding, Minnesota public funding, that's supposed to sunset, and that money is very critical to rural health and the SHIP program. And so there's a big push from the organization and asking other counties to chime in and say we need to continue this. And the other issue that got some attention was a program that is for children of incarcerated parents. 17% of Minnesota 8th, 9th, and 11th graders report parental incarceration, rated as the highest adverse childhood experience in the 2016 Minnesota Student Survey. And so there's a program, an ongoing program. A commissioner from Olmsted is heavily involved in that, but it's the other significant thing is that 66% of men and 77% of women who are incarcerated at the local level in Minnesota have children. So they're discussing and trying to come up with some ideas as to what role counties can have in supporting incarcerated parents. The other thing, I went to the Smith Luncheon, and it is a impressive array of things that they fund. It was more of an award luncheon for some of the organizations that have benefited greatly from Smith and have done a good job. And then last night I had a Hiawatha Valley mental health meeting. At this point, there are some offers for the 2 properties that they are trying to sell, and also approved phase 2 of the remodeling of the Sarnia Street building that has been partially moved into, but will be fully operational after phase 2. Selling the other 2 properties becomes more and more important because that's revenue needed to help pay for the renovation. So that's all I got.
You ate well all week then, huh?
Pardon?
You ate well.
Yeah. Felt like I was on that rubber chicken circuit.
Yeah. The local water meeting, the big thing out of that is we heard a lot of negative comments about the new buffer law a year or 2 ago, and we continued to hear some negatives about that during this last year. I asked them how many actual people in Houston County at this point are not cooperating and getting their buffer things done that need to get them done. And it's like, well, it's below 5, maybe a couple, 3. It's just an extremely minor number, and the office personnel simply doesn't anticipate any big problems, and they do not anticipate having to do any enforcement actions at all in this county. Well,
That's good news,
that's a relief.
right?
The thing that came out of the extension meeting, to me, is not quite so good. Our ag guy, Mike Cruz, reported to us that 20%, now this comes from the state extension, from a financial guy with the Minnesota Extension Service, reported at a meeting that Mike was at that 20% of the farmland that was put into crops this last spring will be put into crops under different financial management next spring. That's 1 in 5 farmers simply aren't going to be putting in their own crops next spring. It's that serious. That's a lot of people, and that affects, well, I look at it this way. I represent 7 townships. I also represent, obviously, the city of Heights and the city of Spring Grove. But most of my area is the people you're talking about. And there are various ways of dealing with some of these things. The Extension Service has several avenues that people can go to ask for help. And how do I deal with this as an individual? How do I, as somebody who simply can't get the money to put in that crop next spring, how do I deal with that? The Extension Service has at least a half dozen different avenues that people can pursue. I don't know how many people are aware of it, but they need to be. It's very, very, very difficult when you just can't get the money. It's very difficult for individuals to ask for help. They need to know what those avenues are that they can get help from.
To kind of dovetail off that, Fred, I should have mentioned at the SHAC meeting, it also came to light that the suicide rate for farmers in the state of Minnesota has really escalated.
Yeah.
It's pretty dire.
Yeah.
For,
Mike talked about that
Yeah,
too.
right.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, I think that's only going to get worse. You know, when we look at things that have been set into place already, that we may not get back some of the trade that
Yeah.
has gone out, and especially you have Argentina and Brazil when they're trying to get infrastructure and trying to build themselves, and China is willing to put in the infrastructure to help them. It kind of puts us at a loss, and that's my fear, is that if prices don't turn around for farmers soon, it's only going to get worse.
We are, now this comes back to county business a little bit. We are disadvantaged because of our topography, because of our karst situation, we are disadvantaged a bit, maybe even quite a bit, in, quote, modern agriculture, unquote, where the mode of operation seems to be get bigger or get out. You see what happens when livestock operations here want to get larger. All of a sudden, there's all these red flags out there, and we've virtually filled this room in planning commission meetings with folks who are opposed to farmers who want to get larger so that they can actually survive in production agriculture. And people are you can't do that. You can't, you're going to mess up the environment, you're going to do all these nasty things. And because of the topography, we're disadvantaged. We're also tremendously disadvantaged by all these hills and valleys and woods and all that sort of thing. My cousin is married to a fellow who farms in north central Iowa. He laughs at me pointedly. My biggest field, when I was, the last time I was talking to him about this, my biggest field was 40 acres. He said, I can't even turn around a combine in that. I mean, he could, but I mean figuratively. He farms a half section, 320 acres is basically about his smallest field. I think he said, well, I do have a couple of pieces, 160. Tremendous disadvantage of scale that we have to deal with. And Jack knows what I've been doing a little bit, trying to needle the Economic Development Organization a little bit to try to get the EDA to understand that they actually could do some things to help agriculture in Houston County by trying to get people to explore alternative ways of doing it. The one thing that comes to mind first, of course, is to go organic. And we have some producers that went to organic milk, and then all of a sudden there was too much of it, and then they wound up selling for a whole lot less than it was costing them, because a gallon of organic milk costs more to produce than a gallon of regular milk, and so it was a little bit of a problem. But the thing that bothered me most, being on the Planning Commission, we had some people a couple of times come in with alternative ways of making money off that farmland. And people were here objecting to that for one reason or another. And the Planning Commission was spending a lot of time really working these folks over that want to use some of our land a little bit differently to try to continue to be financially viable. We've got a problem. We need to look at it.
I have a brother that's a small family dairy farmer up by Nodine, and he too, he can't hardly make it work. He probably has 120 cows, so it's a very small operation. And he's put in some cabins that he rents out on weekends to people who want to do what's called hip camp. It's kind of rusty camping, just to try and get a little extra income to keep moving forward.
Yep.
But
Well,
That's the kind of thing we
Cannot
need
do
to
it.
look at
Yeah.
and try to encourage if we can somehow, and just keep talking about it. We can't really do much, but at least we can
Support.
get it out there.
Yep.
Fred, I would just mention too that jog my memory here, I did call Organic Valley to ask about the solar program that they
Yeah.
announced in the paper, and they gave me a woman to speak to who I got her voicemail, and unfortunately, to this point, she hasn't returned my call. So I will be calling back tomorrow, but, so I'm trying to pursue that at least.
Yep. Okay. Closing public comment. Anybody? A motion for adjournment is in order.
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
Moved and seconded. All those in favor, aye?
Aye.
Aye. We are adjourned. Thank you.